Okay. You never know. Don't be so sure. All right, who wants to start? Or should I just lather on? Don't
first-
let me do that.
First, we're just going to ask you to state your name. Just for the
Okay,
camera.
my name is Ernest Ashley Ricketts,
Okay, and then what was your address growing up?
124 Wisner.
Okay. And what schools did you attend with Hillary?
I attended Eugene Field Elementary School, Emerson Junior High, Maine Township High School East, and Maine Township High School South.
You can tell us whatever you want now.
Wow. Don't let me do that. Ask me something else.
Would you like us to prompt you?
Yeah,
or?
so why don't you talk about that, like that you were talking about how you were just like a block away. When
Oh, okay. So Hillary moved to Park Ridge in 1950. My family moved to Park Ridge in 1952. So we both started kindergarten, and I was too old. My birthday came too late in the year to start in 1951. So I was one of the older kids in 1952. Do they still do that? I don't know. Then, whatever. So we both started kindergarten in 52. We weren't in the same class, but we had I think there were 2 or 3 groups of kids in the kindergarten. So we saw each other and we knew each other. And because everybody, you knew of the other kids. And in the 4th grade, we were in the same class. There were 3 classes. There were about 90, I think, a little over 90 kids in our grade. So in the 4th grade, we had Miss Metzger. But by that time, we were both going to the First Methodist Church Sunday school. So we also knew each other from that. And we went to the Methodist Church all through high school and were in this youth group together. So we knew each other in the 4th grade, and that's when we caught up with each other walking back and forth. So we were friends, we were just, you can imagine. She's just has a remarkable knowledge of everything. She's very interesting to talk to. She's lots of fun. She's very funny. She's got just a great sense of humor. And she's one of the most interesting people that I've had the privilege to say that I know very well. And we used to talk about anything and everything, and we would talk a lot about baseball. And we would talk about, were the Yankees better than the Dodgers? If the Sox ever played the Cubs, which they never did in those days, she could come up with, the Sox pitching staff has a combined ERA of 4.3, and I'm going to take your word for that. So pretty much, she had all the baseball statistics. She'd read the sports page, and she knew all the baseball statistics, and she did that on a regular basis. So you could never argue with her about whose baseball team was better. she statistically, you're saying that the Cubs have a chance. Well, I'm afraid they don't, even though I love the Cubs. So that was, that would get us practically to Elm Street. Just that one conversation. And then we would talk about, there was something occurred in the 50s. It was the International Geophysical Year. And it was all about the latest things going on in the scientific community and at that time, they actually thought that there was going to be another ice age. They were completely wrong about that. They got that wrong. And so we would talk about, we got these pamphlets, that they'd pass out. We'd talk about that. And then anything that we had read, a newspaper article, magazine article, we'd talk about that stuff. And on weekends, in the summertime when we were kids, we used to play baseball on the street corner. And the manhole covers were the bases. And anybody in the neighborhood, and there were quite a few kids in the neighborhood, but we didn't matter. Well, anybody could play. And we'd never get more than like 1 or 2 innings. And then if a car we'd see a car down the street, somebody would yell car, and we'd stop the game and we'd all walk and stand on the car. So it was kind of a strange baseball game. Anyway, we would do that. And if you hit it past over the other curb, it would be way beyond the ability of any other kids to get it. So it was like a home run. And then, of course, we'd argue about, well, did you step on the manhole cover? Yeah. No, I don't think you did. You're out. And so it would devolve usually into an argument that would take 5 or 10 minutes, and then somebody would yell car. So we'd stop that, and everybody got off. And then we'd go back, and somebody would pitch, and then somebody would say, look, you know what, it's lunchtime, and that was that. That was the end of the game. So we would do that. That's when we were fairly small, young. And
how good was a player was she?
How what?
Yeah, how good a baseball player was she?
Oh, Hillary was an extraordinary athlete. And unfortunately, there were no girls' sports. 0. You could be a cheerleader, but you couldn't be a gymnast. You could be a pom-pom girl, but you couldn't play baseball because there wasn't any baseball. You couldn't play tennis. And when was Title IX? 1980 something? I don't know. Until then, there were no girls' sports. And GAA, they had like intramurals, but there weren't any between high schools. So, and I think Hillary got a job as a lifeguard or working at the Park District when she was in junior high or maybe her freshman year of high school. So, but she is a very good athlete and no outlet basically. Besides, I think they did do intramural sports in high school, and they had a group that did that. But basically, that was it, and it was fairly. It wasn't was fairly well organized for an intramural thing here. But, all right, somebody's got to ask me something, otherwise I'm just going to go blathering on indefinitely until everyone passes out.
Have you ever been to her house? Have you ever been over to her house?
Yes, and we'd stand out in front of her house. She had a fence on the corner of Elm and Wisner, and we used to sit on the fence and talk about, argue about stuff, and that was we always had fun doing that. And then they had a porch that was like a 3-season room. And so sometimes we'd go out, sit on the porch, and Bill Clinton told me later that when he and Hillary would come up to visit from Little Rock, they made him sleep on the porch. They made him sleep on that porch. Well, I know that porch very well. They used to make me sleep there. So that's kind of a fun extra credit story, I guess.
So Rick, so when you guys would hang out and talk, what seemed to be what was she most passionate about? What got her really riled up mostly?
Well, we had so much fun stuff to talk about. Joe McCarthy. We talked about the Korean War. I mean, we talked about really stuff that you don't think little kids are interested in, but we thought, you name it. And we had, among other strange things that we did as children, we used to have drills in case they dropped an atomic bomb on Chicago. Really? You're going to have a drill for that? What sort of drill would that be? You're all thinking, I'm sure. We would have a fire drill alarm going, and then we would all go in the hall and crouch by our lockers with our hands over our heads, and until they buzzed the all clear, and the teachers would all be standing around looking at each other and think for a minute. This is for in case the Soviet Union dropped an atomic bomb on Chicago, and you think you're in the 4th grade, and you think you're gonna make it through that experience by crouching in the hall next to your locker. I got bad news for you. That ain't gonna happen. And the idea that the naive conception that would, all our kids are gonna be safe because they're all crouching in the hallway of the school. No. So the thoughts that went through my mind, I can't speak for anyone else, was that this is probably the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. And I'm sure that after the nuclear holocaust occurs, they'll find the skeletons of all of these children in the hallway, vaporized by the hydrogen bomb. But there were so many things that I thought were just like, really? We had and I don't know, John's too young to remember that. We had Nike missile installations around the city. And our family had a restaurant on North Avenue, and across the street from the restaurant was the Nike missile installation. So that if the Soviet bombers came over, we could shoot them down with these. And there were Army guys stationed there. I mean, there was one on Lakeshore Drive too. Those are the only two that I heard. Anyway, so we talk about stuff. We talk about that, and the politics, Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson and Everett Dirksen and Paul Douglas, who were the best friends and the best senators Illinois ever had, and Republican and Democrat, and they did so much to help the environment and save Lake Michigan, and they worked together to do that. And then Kennedy and Nixon was kind of, I don't know what's the best word to describe him, crafty. But we talked about that, and then of course then it went to Goldwater and Kennedy and Johnson, but we were in high school by that time. So we had the political discussions, and then we talked about religion. We talked about everything that you're not supposed to talk about. But we would always part friends when I would go the rest of the way south on Wisner Street. And I could always tell that Hillary would sometimes she would take the opposing, whatever I said, she would say that was stupid and say the exact opposite. And sometimes she would say it not because she believed it, but because she just loved having a debate about something. And so I could look at her, and I knew that she was doing this it was recreation. It was fun, getting me to defend whatever position I had on whatever it was that we were talking about. And she was really getting a kick out of it. And I can see that when I see her, I can see that still. I can still see that in her eyes, that she's enjoying the moment, and she's enjoying the interaction and even the altercation. She's very, very good at, for example, when the Congressional Committee went after her about whatever they go after her about on a fairly regular basis, she's just amazing that she can spend 12 hours in front of those guys. Doesn't faze her. I don't think anybody could do that. And that's amazing. That's a gift. Her mother once said, we were at some event, and my wife asked her mom, how did Hillary develop this capability of doing this? And her mom said, Dorothy said, you know, she's always been able to stare the devil down from day one. She said, that's a gift, and that's for sure. And if anybody can stare the devil down, she can.
You think it could be because of her relationship with her dad, who was a very tough guy?
Yeah, he didn't suffer fools gladly, let's put it that way. And neither did Hillary, and neither does Hillary. And I would say that her dad was a super nice guy. He was always, he would say, "Hey, there's Ricky out there, hey," and he was always trying to get grass to grow under his elm tree and on the Wisner side of and he'd be out there and "Hi, Mr. Rodham," he'd walk by. But he was he was a great guy. But Hillary and her brothers, he wasn't. He had them do chores and different things, and he had expectations that they needed to meet those expectations, that's for sure. So he was really a neat guy, I thought. And he was an entrepreneur. He was Hillary likes to say she believes in small business and entrepreneurial growth in the country because that's her background. That's where she came from. And that's true. That's what Park Ridge was. People working in the big corporations in the city, and they'd take the train back and forth because was one of those suburbs that everybody moved out of the city after the war. And then there were people like my dad, who owned a restaurant on just west of Oak Park, and Hillary's dad, who had a drapery business. And that's they were entrepreneurs. They borrowed money, and that's how they got and started a business. And so my dad was always at the restaurant, and then when it got to be, and then when my time came. So, okay. I don't know, where are we here? Who's got something that they want to
So
ask?
you said that you went to the Methodist church with Hillary. Can you talk about growing up with her in that regard and how that's influenced her?
Oh, wow. Okay, we went to Hillary's mom. Both of Hillary's parents were Sunday school teachers at the church. My aunt and uncle were. And it was kind of like a community. I don't know, what's it like now? Do you guys all have a church affiliation, or pretty much not anymore, or?
I go to the Methodist church.
Oh, the First Methodist in Park? Really? You do? Good for you. When my aunt died, this has no relation to anything. When my aunt died a couple of years ago, she was buried out of the Methodist church. She's at Tyler Main Cemetery, for my uncle. And the minister is a woman. At the burial, is she still the head pastor?
No,
Oh.
she's been moved.
Okay. She's at the burial, and she says the prayer, and she said, "And God, in her infinite wisdom." And I looked at my wife, because nobody in the Methodist Church when I was a kid would have said, and God in her infinite wisdom. That would have been, people would have gone, what? So it was a very different place when I was there. It was fairly conservative. Park Ridge was 99.9% white. And a lot of the people that moved to Park Ridge because they thought it was going to be a safe place to raise their children. And so we basically were a fairly, we were sheltered, let's put it that way. I'm sure you are still sheltered because your parents shelter you, but not in the sense that you're not exposed to the rest of the world and the nightly news and everything. Anyway, the church was, we had summer church-related activities that we did, and then we had, when we were kids, and then when we were in high school, we had a group called the University of Life, which, does that still exist? No, sadly. And our minister, the youth minister, was in charge of the University of Life. And in 1961, they hired a guy from who had just graduated from the seminary. His name was Don Jones, and he became the youth minister. And he was a liberal guy from the East, and decided that we were just so provincial that we didn't know anything. And so he was going to proceed to tell us, or to give us the other side of the story that we weren't getting. And so he took us to a Jewish temple, and we all asked the rabbi questions. He took us, he had a Catholic, a priest come and talk to us. He had an atheist. And the people in the meantime, the members of the church are, what's this guy up to? And he had one of our history teachers at Maine East was just a virulent anti-communist. So he had him come and talk to us. But then Don would always talk to the person, and they would always have a discussion about, and basically Don would say, you know what, he never did it in a derogatory way, but they would discuss every aspect of what the guy had lectured about and what. Well, so in other words, you're saying that all the kids listening shouldn't be this way; they should be this way, and he talked about sex, which was like, that was like the topic of, one night we had a role play where this guy, some kid got his girlfriend pregnant. Well, the parents were like calling each other up. What are we going to do? The world is now coming to an end because the youth minister talked about an unplanned pregnancy in the University of Life. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine anything more just obscene than talking about anything like that to these sheltered kids who have spent their lives not knowing anything about any of that stuff, okay? So Don got into a little trouble with that, but, okay, well, I won't do that again. Then he took us to the Sunday evening club, and the speaker at the Sunday evening club was that radical communist rabble-rouser, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Oh, what? Where did you kids go? And how in the world? Well, we went on the bus. Don rented a bus, piled us all on the bus, off we went, and afterward, he arranged for us to have the opportunity to meet Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So we all stood after we'd heard this beautiful, beautiful speech that he gave, we all stood and walked up and shook hands with him. And the parentals, I'm sure that was it. This guy's got to go, because he's gone way over the edge. This doesn't have anything to do with Methodism. Actually, it had everything to do with Methodism. And Don was gone. He became a professor of ethics at Drew University. And later on, everybody was like, oh my God, we're just devastated that we lost this guy, because he was such a wonderful, he was so smart, and he was had such a great intellect. Anyway, years later, I had a great opportunity to see him again at the inauguration. So we got to be friends, and we would see each other at different Clinton events, and that was a great thing. We had an extraordinary opportunity to expand our worldview, and it was thanks to him. And Hillary and Don corresponded while she was at Wellesley. And at one event in the 90s, it was at Hillary's birthday party. I had a chance to visit with Don and Alan Schechter, who had been Hillary's political science professor at Wellesley, who has written many books, and very, very extraordinarily bright guy. And these two guys were very instrumental in Hillary's development as a adult, her religious philosophy, her political philosophy. They were both important people in her life.
So Rick, how was when you were doing this University of Life? Of course, kids, and I remember it's just everything seems normal to you as a kid. Well, how were you guys reacting when you were seeing all these new topics, And then, do you remember anything like Hillary commenting or anything that, you know, she says that she's been very struck by the, you know, all of those things that you mentioned. Was there anything that stands out as far as how you remember she was impacted, or, and then what was the kids, how did you guys feel about it at the time?
You know, I remember a little bit about the role-playing thing that we did, because I was part of that. And we were all just mortified that we were doing this, because nobody ever talked about anything like that. And so it was very hard for us to not only, it wasn't only hard for us to role play, going and telling your parents that you'd gotten a girl pregnant, but it was hard to even talk about that. And what I came to learn later was that years later, Don had counseled a young girl in our church group who had become pregnant. And he was just appalled that nobody ever talked about that. And he said, you kids just never, it was like there was no information available. And so that's why he did it. And this was like 62, maybe 35 years later. So I think the statute of limitations on his, but he never told me who it was, but he did say that that was what motivated him to do that. And it kind of freaked us out. But that was the kind of stuff he did. We would watch movies like Rebel Without a Cause. We saw that. We saw East of Eden. He was looking more for how kids related to their parents and how to make the youth group understand that he wanted the Methodist theology to be compassion and service. He said, I don't care, you want to believe in the virgin birth? Go for it. You want to believe in the resurrection? I'm all for you. Should you, however, not believe in those things, you can still be a Methodist if you believe that you need to do unto others as others do unto you. That's the one and prevailing belief that makes Methodism function. And you need to spend your life caring about other people. And that's who a Methodist is. The rest of it is all window dressing. He said, it doesn't matter. And I said, window dressing? I don't think so. He said, well, to some, it is. That's the dogma's more important. To others, like me, he said it's not. It doesn't mean anything. And so I think I've always thought Hillary is she never wears her Methodism on her sleeve. She never wears her religion on her sleeve. But she wears it in her heart. She believes that other people, compassion, service, that's Christianity and acceptance. And those are, I think that's where how she's conducting her campaign.
Okay, so let's talk about some more, think of some questions about family, following up on family, favorite stories of when younger. So before we get into high school, Rick knew her a lot, so think of some questions about different people in Hillary's family, different situations and favorite stories and things like that. So let's,
So who's the minister now?
David Astleyson. He just came in July. So
Oh,
he's
yeah?
Mhm.
Where's he from?
originally from South Dakota.
Oh,
So,
my.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's it like? What's it like? Do you have a youth group anymore?
Mhm. Oh yeah.
Are there a
Yeah.
lot, how many kids are there?
Um,
Excuse me.
in high school there are like 10 of us, and then in middle school there are like another 15 to 20, but there are a lot of little kids, so
Wow. Do you still have retreats?
sometimes.
We used to go up to the Methodist campground up in Lake Geneva,
Mhm.
and we would have three. We had 3 a year. We had like 110 kids in our youth group, and it was a lot. We had a lot of fun. That was because we would have church on Sunday, and then I think the youth group was like on Wednesday night or Thursday night or something. So it was a chance to get out of the house again, you know. It was always fun. So, but I think that she's always been a very a practicing Methodist and a very strong. Has a very, very strong background in her faith, and she's never been one of those people that proselytizes in any way. It's what she believes, and we went to her dad's funeral service in Little Rock when he died in '92. And it was at the First Methodist Church of Little Rock. And Bill, who is probably the greatest public speaker in the history of public speaking, gave just a beautiful eulogy about his father-in-law that was just, it was intensely personal and just spot on of his character and who he was and what a kind of person he was, and very, very loving, which is a completely off the topic, whatever the topic is. Okay, you gotta ask me something, otherwise I'm just gonna keep rumbling on forever.
Okay, so you said you used to walk a lot with Hillary and you guys would talk about anything. Do you guys have and did you guys do any clubs together, or did you guys have like a hangout spot with all your friends?
You know, we had when we were younger, it was by her house, and when we were older, we would see each other at school and at church, but as far as a place in town, there really wasn't any place. When we were kids, we used to go to the Pickwick on Saturday, because they had like 15 color cartoons, and you could tell if it was a popular show by how far down the line went. If it went all the way to Pines, which was at the men's store at the end of the street, it was like a blockbuster. It was like Old Yeller went all the way to Pines. If it was just a normal, it didn't go. But every kid in Park Ridge would go to the Saturday matinee. And it was 25 cents to get in. This was it was 25 cents to get in. It was 15 cents for popcorn. And if you wanted a soft drink, it was another 15 cents. You could get, they didn't have any diets. No, nothing was diet. You could get a Coke or an Orange Crush or a Green River, which, does anybody know what Green River is? And that was 15 cents. So it was a pretty cheap event, except that if the money was different. And so, but you would see literally every kid in this town and in the line, and if you got there late, you'd have to sit up in front and look at the screen until you got really a terrible headache. But it was a real Saturday event. So, and then the swimming pool at Hinkley Field, that in the summertime, and we used to ride our bikes around a lot. Everybody rode their bikes around, and you'd just get in your bike and disappear someplace, and then about 3 hours later you'd come back. Or somebody would call, Alex Weigel's mom would say, "Hey, Rick, your mom called. You gotta go home." Or maybe she'd just make that up. I don't know. No, I didn't call you. Why'd you come home for? I don't know. Alex's mom told me to leave. So we used to do that, and no, but there wasn't, as far as we would go to. There were 2 pizza places, Reggio's and Romano's. Reggio's on Oakton, and I think Romano's is out in someplace out in Des Plaines or something. We used to go there, and that was fun. And then after dances, there was a place called DeLeo's, and when we were freshmen, Hillary and I went to the Girls' Choice. And do you still have a Girls' Choice? And her dad drove. I was 14, so I wasn't going to drive. And we went to DeLeo's after the dance. And did they still make the corsages for the guys?
Yeah, the rose.
Yeah, they used to make funny corsages back in ancient times, and I really wish I had that corsage, but I don't remember what she made. But we had fun, and I think we were in the same world history class when we were freshmen. And I used to make her laugh. I sat behind her because of our names. And I used to make her laugh. And the history teacher, who was the guy that Don Jones got,
Paul Carlson.
yeah, he'd get mad that I was make her laugh. And he would say things like, you know, I expect this from Ricky, but Hillary, my expectations are way higher for you. It didn't bother me.
So that's how Hillary was perceived by teachers, like as this like high achieving student. But how was she perceived by other students in high school?
Well, in high school, she was always volunteering for stuff. She was always the go-to person if you had to organize an event or do something. That was part of her repertoire. You know, she was let's see if Hillary wants to do it. And she became, when we were seniors, we were on student council, and I was the sportsmanship committee chairman, and she was the organizations committee chairman. And I told John this story. We'd had it here. We'd had a election. It was the election jitney, it was called. It was an all-school assembly in the field house. And the election skits would get kind of wild. And people would stomp, and you know, there were like 4,500 kids. It was an all-school assembly. So the administration was ever trying to clamp down on the student body. That was their one main goal in life. Decided that there was no more election jitney when the schools split. So Hillary, being the organizations committee chairman, when we got to Maine South, they determined that there'd still be an all-school assembly, but no skits and no. So Hillary sat down and figured out how to do like a political convention, make the all-school assembly into a political convention, which was going to be a civics lesson besides the opportunity to hear what the candidates had to say. So each homeroom was going to be like a delegation. And they'd make signs, and you could demonstrate in the aisles, and just like a political convention. So she had to explain this to Dr. Watson, who was the principal of the school of Maine South. And so we went into the boardroom, and the school administrators were sitting there, and Hillary was there, I was there for some reason, to lend moral support. Actually, I never lent moral support. I just tried to make her laugh. So Dr. Watson had a facial tick. And when he was unknowing of what you were talking about, it kind of became exaggerated. So Hillary starts reading her proposal, and it's brilliant, of course. And it's going to be a microcosm of the political convention. And Dr. Watson was like, and Hillary was here, and every once in a while she'd look up. And then, after the first demonstration, the gavel would be pounded, and Dr. Watson was So I look over at her now. Excuse me, Hillary, can you answer a question? I've just got a question. And she never blinked. She got through it without me making her laugh once. And I would just, that's one of the regrets of my life. And I could never get her even to crack a smile. Because I was going, Dr. Watson and I were both going at the same time. So we had the assembly. It went off like a well-oiled machine. And I don't know who got elected, but it was a great, I don't know, I'm sure it vaporized as soon as Hillary left Maine South, but it was a great idea, and it created an opportunity for kids to actually see what a political convention was like. And I had an opportunity later I attended the one in Chicago, which I think was in '97. And it was a lot like Hillary's. It was probably a little more disorganized than her. Hers was probably more organized. But, so that's my organization's committee chairman story. And I don't.
What about in terms of like appearances?
Of what?
Appearances. So like, yeah, was Hillary like other girls? Does she care about I don't know, makeup, shopping?
Oh yeah. Yeah, she was, it's really funny because I don't know how you all feel about the feminist movement, but it's an interesting discussion because at the time when we were kids, and it said, there was an article about in today's paper about the Richard Speck and the student nurses, and in the Tribune, you could be a nurse, but you couldn't be a doctor. You could be a hygienist, but you couldn't be a dentist. You could be a legal secretary, but you couldn't be a lawyer. You could be, all these ancillary jobs, but you couldn't be the main person. And that changed. And the funny thing is growing up, people have said to me, well, did you ever think that Hillary would have the life and the career and I can honestly say, I never thought that she wouldn't. And the girls that we grew up with, and like Judy, who had a long teaching career, were all extremely bright and gifted, and we didn't think, well, because she's a girl, why would she not be able to be a lawyer or a doctor or a dentist or whatever? Why would you be a stewardess and not a pilot? But when we were in the 6th grade, the class prophecy was that Hillary would marry a senator. So they couldn't think of actually being a senator, but she could marry a senator. And so, you know, these were very gifted young women, and they were very bright. They were very, very well educated. Not just Hillary, but the other girls that I went to high school with. And they've become very accomplished women. And I don't think that your generation understands what it was like to be a woman in the 50s and the 60s.
So Rick, talk about like, did she ever say, you ever remember an incident when she was told that you can't do something? Did she ever talk about what her views were like on women at all?
Well, you know, she was, wow. You know, that's a whole, I mean, the story is, and I personally don't have, that she sent a letter to NASA when volunteering her services as an astronaut. And they sent her a letter back saying that you don't have women astronauts in 1964. And then after she graduated from Wellesley, she gave the first commencement address by a student ever at Wellesley. I mean, and she used that platform to go after the senator from Massachusetts at the time for whatever public statements he'd made. And so, you know, I would say there was never any question in my mind that when she was admitted to Yale Law School, why would anybody not admit her to Yale Law School? She was like, of the GPA of our graduating class, I think she was second or third or fourth in the class. And the valedictorian went on to become a physician, and the salutatorian, I think, became a nuclear engineer or something. So, but it was, you know, it started to change. That's when when 65, and then really the feminist Gloria Steinem and that was a revolution that really changed things. But how do you guys feel about how do you feel about it? Do you feel like it's kind of, it's the tsunami of feminism is washed over and it's kind of gone back, or?
Oh, you mean nowadays? like modern times.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah, I think it started back again. Like you hear a lot about women like protesting in some places, or just especially equal pay. Protest for that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What,
No.
no, say, just say I don't care, say anything.
I mean, also there's people like advocating because like in third world countries, people are like women if they like go out they get acid thrown on them. So like
Yeah,
that's why we need it still.
Yeah, I think it's kind of shifted from like an American feminism to more of like a far-reaching, like looking outside of America kind of type of feminism. Like now that we have more rights, people are starting to like they're still advocating for rights that we still don't have, but it's also focused to a more of we're lucky enough to have this. Let's get it for everybody.
yeah, yeah. And you don't believe that you don't believe that you don't believe the revolution is over, do you?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like the French Revolution, like
Yeah.
because they say there's been speculation on like when it really ended. There's people that said like it was the whole 19th century, like that was also a revolution in France. So it's kind of like it could be like that with the feminist movement, that it's still like ongoing.
Well, my daughter, our daughter is 32, and she says there's the first tier feminist revolution and the second tier. And she says we're now in the second tier, which is a very different place than what my generation. And your generation was the one that changed the